Does God exist? I sure think so. I would sum up my argument with what we've learned from Descartes' Meditations, stating absolute statements about our world that proves that there needs to be some sort of creator, which we call God. But that's too short and simple of an explanation. Instead of stating evidence for God, I'm going to use theories or explanations that people use that say he doesn't exist. Then I'll debunk those statements and support it with evidence or my own statements. I might even create my own theories that could open some eyes. Let's start out simple with one of the most common examples of arguments that people theorize that apparently disprove God's existence. This statement is, if God really does exist, why does he let so many bad things happen in this world? This statement would suggest that God can only do good and create good. This argument can be disproved with a common Christian teaching that is, each person is created with their own free will. If that's true, then that would mean that people have the choice to be good, but that also means they have the choice to be bad, which could affect people that are innocent or undeserving of harm. Then disbelievers will go on and say something like, well, what if a meteor hits Earth and destroys it? That's not something a human's free will would affect. True, but there's also other teachings about that, which are other statements about what God is. One that would disprove this statement is the idea of deism, which is the belief that God created the universe and then left it alone. If this is true, then God would have no influence over that meteor hitting Earth. All these arguments really lead up to a few similar statements. These would be, how is God all-knowing? How is God all-powerful? And how is God all-present? Or really in all, just, how can God be perfect? This ties into the idea that for an entity to be a God, it must be perfect. I would say that God doesn't have to be perfect. Not that he isn't, but he doesn't have to be. God might have a free will, or limitations, or have a mix of these. Even though he would be all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present, if he has a free will, he could limit himself completely or to a certain extent on one or all of these abilities. If all this is true, it would explain why our world we live in is so imperfect. God, from my own idea, could actually be explained through science. Even though I'm not the first one to think like this, like Gödel's ontological theorem, which apparently proves the existence of God through mathematics, I might be the first one to see it in this light. The way we might be able to prove God's existence scientifically is through the theory of dimensions. Us humans see in the third dimension, which means we see three-dimensional figures. The fourth dimension gets pretty interesting. It's theorized that being a living or just an entity that sees in the fourth dimension, seeing fourth-dimensional figures, would be able to see everything at once. Yes, everything at once, in one glance. Sounds like a godlike power to me, such as all-knowing and all-present. This could suggest that God may be a fourth-dimensional being. Alright, we will just be simple from here on out. We'll move back down to philosophical terms. Besides Descartes' Meditations, another very good theory comes from St. Thomas Aquinas and his theory of motion. This theory really sums up the way we logically and reasonably prove that the existence of God. The idea is that everything that has motion had to have been given that motion. We had scientifically proven this, so through reasoning, we would get to the fact that all motion would have had to link back to the very first motion. For that first motion, again, something would have had to give it that motion. This first pusher we call God. And that really just sums up my argument. Thank you.